to episode 412 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I am here with
Jess
and Reid.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we're going to be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1959's Some Like It Hot, which is a movie talked about a little bit on the podcast before, but this is the deep dive, and it's we'll just spoil it that it's Reid's favorite movie.
ever.
Yeah, it's up there for sure.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's your plug to stick around for part 2 or skip ahead. Who knows what your feeling is. All right, I'm gonna jump in with a movie that we talked about recently. I think Andrew reviewed it, but let's talk about Elvis. The figure and the movie, directed by Baz Luhrmann. But yeah, this one, it stars Austin Butler as Elvis. You have Tom Hanks as Colonel Tom Parker. There's a gazillion other people in this movie playing various things. So those are mainly the two that you need to focus on. And this, it's very much, I think Andrew talked about it a few weeks ago, it's very much a Baz Luhrmann joint. If you're familiar with Baz Luhrmann, whether it be Moulin Rouge.
Is it Baz or Boz?
Excuse me, Baz Luhrmann.
I've never asked him.
Yeah, well, but you're probably familiar, Moulin Rouge, Great Gatsby, Romeo plus Juliet, Australia. But as Andrew mentioned, like he's very much working within his own space. And so when you come to Elvis, like it's going to be a Baz Luhrmann production. But I say that by saying, like, one, it's the whole thing of like, just go in there, don't expect to be anything different. It's very much like Baz Luhrmann to the nth degree. But I think that's perfectly suited for Elvis, a very flashy, very iconic, very just kind of pop culture heavy figure. Baz, I think really captures. Well, let me just talk a little bit first about just kind of how this thing is structured. So you go through like an hour that feels like just a straight montage of kind of like the main points of like him growing up and becoming Elvis Presley to a degree. And Colonel Tom Parker getting a part of that whole, getting a part of his career, becoming his manager and things like that. And then the rest of the movie, which I'll agree with Andrew, is very long, is more about him being Elvis and what that means and kind of the reception to that. I kind of have I was kind of like it was good, but kind of kind of mellow to the movie. But I've really kind of come to appreciate it more as I've gotten away from it. I think Austin Butler's performance is really good. There's a lot of, I saw somebody who was sharing clips of Elvis performances, and he like captures like the mannerisms and like identically how Elvis is like performing things. There was one that people were sharing where he was doing the show in Las Vegas, and he's like singing really close to the mic, and he like puts the mic in his mouth and pulls it out and makes this noise, and you see it in the movie and you're just like, what is he doing? And then you see the clip of Elvis actually doing it, you're like, oh no, like it's like a real thing. And so even though he may not look like 100% like Elvis, I think he really he's more capturing the essence of Elvis as like a performer and a presence. And then Tom Hanks is kind of, you kind of have to get on the wavelength with him for a while, but I think that the third act of the movie is when he kind of really shows up, and it shows why you kind of wanted just somebody who's a strong actor like Tom Hanks in this role. But the thing that really kind of I've been stewing on with this movie is just how Baz Luhrmann's tendency, his editing style, his lavishness, everything like that is just perfectly married to not only is it's very in tune to what capturing the public's attention and becoming like a cultural icon like Elvis was. I think this is very much like the thing that fascinated me was there's so many scenes where they're doing like these kind of really quick montages of like performances and him interacting with people, and it's all captured in like that very montagey, like quick edit, fast cuts style that you're familiar with if you've seen a Baz Luhrmann movie. But it makes sense in this context because you're making this movie in 2022, and I feel like he's kind of commenting on a way on stardom and entertainment and pop culture today, but he's using the kind of infrastructure of today, of how we understand celebrity today, to show how much of a like figure and that people like knew, like how much of a figure that Elvis was. And that's really fascinating because it like you just have like this kind of constant like push and pull of it's not like what you would typically see in a biopic where you're just kind of seeing these performances because you want to hear like Viva Las Vegas or Suspicious Minds or something. Like it's not just him performing the songs necessarily. It's also like these cuts and edits with modern musicians. Like there's this part where an Elvis song is playing and he's walking through Beale Street looking to go into this club, and it's splicing an Elvis song with Doja Cat. And so you kind of have like, and so it's kind of like this thing on, not that Doja Cat is necessarily the level of star today as Elvis was then, but it's all about like this concept of sampling, because at this point Elvis is a little burnt out. He just went through the whole where the U.S. government is trying to like shut him down for pretty much shaking his hips around, and he's kind of like down. And so he goes to Beale Street in Memphis and is hanging out in this club with Sister Rosetta Thorne and B.B. King, and you see Little Richard, and it's kind of just going back to the people that he grew up in a poor, predominantly African American part of Tennessee. And so it's you kind of see him going back more to where he came from and like where he was inspired to make the music that he does. And so by doing that, you kind of see this line between how the songs that Sister Rosetta Thorne is playing influenced Elvis, and what Elvis was playing influences Doja Cat, and how music and culture is all about sampling from what came from before. And I think that's what's really magical about this movie. And I think that Baz Luhrmann, it makes him perfect as the person to make a biopic about Elvis Presley, is because with the style of editing, with all of these ways that he's able to cut and just kind of pull you from one section to another section in almost this like breakneck roller coaster fashion. It's all about how people are digesting these figures, as well as how music especially is such an art form in something that people are constantly not stealing from, but like you're constantly being inspired by the generation before, and you're constantly kind of taking stuff from there in order to inform your music. And so it's less a comment going, oh, Elvis stole all this music from these people, and more, no, like what they were doing inspired him, and then he made his stuff, and it really resonated with people, and then people ever since have been kind of so it's all just kind of a through line through that. And I found that to be really not only like emphasized through the script, but also emphasized just in a really cinematic fashion through the editing, through the way that Baz Luhrmann kind of navigates you through his life and through these sections where he's at like the height of his popularity. And then it also just has like these just really like this is why you go see this kind of sequences from the performance he does in Vegas to his NBC special to the performance he gives after in Alabama as the governor is there, talking about the salacious Elvis Presley. He he like that whole sequence where you have, it's great because you have Elvis about to perform and kind of going through the self-realization that I'm just going to do what I want to do. And like you can, like, next door, and he's doing this cross-cutting between what is pretty much a Confederate rally by this bigot Alabama governor at the time, who and like, so you're capturing like the crowd there compared to this crowd of people, with just the sensation of like how crowds are feeding off of these personalities. And not that like that's necessarily a negative thing, but it puts you into the mind space of like, if you're somebody like Elvis, you control so much emotion in front of you, much like the governor speaking to his crowd. So like, if you're a person on the stage, that you're a public figure, that people know and people put a lot of affection toward, you have this power to, by your choice, to kind of sway what you want to say. And there's kind of really just this really it's just a really powerful scene, and the way he's able to cross-cut it is great. So it's not a perfect movie. I don't feel like most Baz Luhrmann movies are very perfect, because there's so many. He reminds me a lot of somebody like Spike Lee, who a lot of the times will hit well, but also a lot of the movies have so many ideas going and are just so like assaultive to the mind sometimes because of all the different stuff they're doing, that it's never gonna be a perfect movie, but there's always like interesting ideas in inside of it. And I don't know, I feel like Elvis, I liked it more. I think I liked it a little bit more than the Gatsby movie. It's probably one of my one on like the higher side of Baz Luhrmann's movies, and I think that he seemed like it was the kind of perfect way to encapsulate him as a figure. So if you go see it, if it's still playing at a theater, like, fuck Thor, Love and Thunder, and go see Elvis. It's fucking great.
I don't really know much about him, like his story, and even really his music. It's never been music that I grew up listening to. I think my mom told me once, though, that she went to like one of his last shows before he died, or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong on that fact, but I'd kind of just be interested in just knowing more about it, since he's from our state. But.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I think it's worth seeing, whether you're I mean, I've talked to people who are like big Elvis fans, and they really responded to it. But I think also, if you're not, there's just like this. I think there's this kind of media commentary going on that is really that's pretty astute for like a flashy, big, kind of blockbustery biopic thing. I would rather watch this than Tom Hooper's whatever, like Darkest Hour bullshit, like on Winston Churchill, where it's just him going, "We got to do this to get the Nazis," or something like you're like, whatever, like, fuck that shit. Like, this is great. This has like it's like traversing, it's just like time traveling and shit in the middle of it. It's great. You're just like, this is just this is why you go and watch something on a big screen. So I highly recommend Elvis. I if I watch it again by the end of the year, it might rank high for me, because it was good. But Reid, I'm gonna toss it over to you, since I've talked for 12 minutes.
No, you're good. It made me want to see Elvis, and I already kind of did, but yeah, I need to see it soon.
Go see Elvis.
I'm not recommending the movie. I watched Cha Cha Real Smooth, Cooper Raif's new movie. That was a huge hit at Sundance. I think Apple bought it for probably a ton of money because it was so popular. He had a movie a few years ago called Shithouse that I didn't see, but I had some friends that liked it. I don't know if either of y'all saw it. But he's like a super young guy. Like, I think he's 24 right now. This is his second feature, really indie, low budget first feature. And then this one has him, Leslie Mann, Dakota Johnson, some bigger names associated with it. But basically it's similar to like it's kind of like a modern day Graduate, in terms of it's about a kid who just graduated from college, doesn't really know what he's doing with his life, is working a shitty job at the mall food court, and is trying to figure out what to do next. And you find out that he's working at this fast food restaurant, but he really is good at talking to people, basically, is good at, like, being a party guy, like, getting things going, and he goes to his brother's friend's bar mitzvah, and he's, like, the reason the party gets started. Like, he, like, goes around and gets everyone hyped, gets them on the dance floor, makes it a fun party, and then all of a sudden, all the moms in the, like, neighborhood that are friends with all these same kids are like, well, you gotta be the party starter at my kid's bar mitzvah, and so on and so on and so on. So he spends, like, the summer working that job. And then alongside that, he becomes friends with Dakota Johnson, who is a young mom, and her daughter, who is like a 13-year-old, alongside, like, the kid. She's going to the bar mitzvahs as well. I need to figure out the actress's name, because she's actually one of the bright spots. But basically, this is the reason I didn't like this movie, is I just found Cooper Raiff to be pretty insufferable as a performer, and knowing that he wrote and directed it as well, because I've never seen anyone write a movie that was just, like, meant to hype them up so much. Like, everything the other characters are saying to him is just, like, positive, like, good. Like, you're so sweet, you're so kind, you're so nice, you're amazing, you're the best person I've ever met, like, you've changed my life. And it just feels so self-serving, like, every second. And it just feels like he's trying to... Honestly, if he wrote this character and was just the writer-director and not the actor, too, I would maybe be less harsh on it. But I find, like, the whole thing, like, he has Dakota Johnson and Leslie Mann, like, these incredibly famous actresses in his movie telling him that he's so perfect, and, like, he, like, fins off Dakota Johnson's advances, and is, like, just such a, like, model kid, basically. And it's just so, like, it's honestly brutal to watch for that reason in my mind, because I'm, like, it's just kind of gross watching this guy just watch make a movie, spend all this money to make a movie that's just, like, to show off how good of a person he is. And I'm just...
It sounds like the scene in Nathan For You when he hires the woman to say "I love you" to him. Like, like you describing it. That's what it sounds like.
No, that is a really good point of reference. The young actress's name in it is Vanessa Burkhart. She's actually really good. But and a lot of the other performers are doing, like, some good work, but every scene has Cooper Raiff in it. Like, he is the star, he is the character, and I just found myself rolling my eyes every time he stepped in front of the camera. And I really, like, I do have some friends that liked his first movie, but I'm super hesitant to even check it out, because I can't imagine what that one's like. But basically, he plays this character, and he ends up getting mixed up into, like, some not so great situations, obviously. Because, like, he needs some drama for his movie. But even then, like, he's basically painted as, like, well, if he's making a mistake, he's just an innocent young man. Like, he's just, like, making a little mistake. He's still, like, a nice, sweet guy, perfect. And I found it really gross. I guess I don't have a lot more to say about it than that, but I try not to, like, hate on, like, small indie movies, that it's like, wow, good job making your movie. Like, you did, that's a really big deal to make a movie. Wow.
Reed's gonna die, so Apple.
The vibes.
Reed. Yeah. I was gonna say, like, Reed. Apple TV is hearing Reed's descent and is just like, we'll take care of you, buddy.
Yeah, but, like, I don't try to hate on many indie movies, but, like, I'm usually just like, if I don't like it, I just kind of, like, let other people enjoy it. I'm like, whatever. Like, it's not changing that much. But this one's bad. Like, avoid or hate watch, in my opinion. And I don't understand how it has the acclaim it has. I don't understand how anyone can, like, watch it. Like, I know it's probably too harsh of a thing to say. Can watch it and be, like, enjoying themselves. Unless you also just love Cooper Raiff. Seems like a really sweet guy.
I don't even know who he is, so that's an easy one for me.
Yeah. He's, in my opinion, super annoying.
What else have I seen him in?
I think just
I was looking while he was talking.
He looks familiar. Is he in a TV show, maybe?
I'm looking at TV.
Looks like he did a couple
kissed you,
other things, but
Shithouse, Cha-Cha Real Smooth.
But yeah, I would avoid, in my opinion. I mean, I'm hopeful. Honestly, I was thinking the other day, I'm like, people should be really hard on him about this one, because I don't want him to be, like, 40 and still, like, paying 25-year-old women to, like, tell him he's amazing. You know, like, he needs to be knocked down a peg now, so that way he can actually make good movies at some point.
What? So it end up like Woody Allen?
Yeah, exactly. He strikes me like it seems like he wanted to make a bit of a Woody Allen movie.
Oh, they all do.
Except he's not like misanthropic enough. So yeah, that's Cha Cha Real Smooth. It's on Apple TV Plus. Not worth watching.
Would not recommend.
No.
Man.
Reed's saving all his praise for the second half. It's okay. It's all good. Well, real quickly, I want to talk about a movie that is now in the Criterion Collection, and I believe it's on, or I watched it on the Criterion Channel, and that's Mississippi Masala. It's directed by Mira Nair, who I think we're fans of here at the podcast. I think we've talked about like Monsoon Wedding. I'm trying to think of others that I've seen of hers. No, she follows us on Twitter. Shout out to Mira. No, I've seen Monsoon Wedding, Queen of Catway, and then this one. But yeah, it's this one I really enjoyed. I haven't seen Monsoon Wedding in forever, so I wouldn't know how to compare it to that. But Mississippi Masala came out in 91. You start by you see this Indian family who is expelled from Uganda when a dictator takes power, and his whole deal is that he just wants like natural born Africans there in Uganda. And so a lot of the Indian population who are there because they came to construct a lot of the infrastructure there on the in their cities, and just kind of stuck around. They all are. There's like a mass exodus as they leave, and so the family, I guess, kind of moves around. They go to like England. You don't really see it. It kind of Indiana Jones it, where it's like England, Mississippi. But they end up, I think it's I forgot how many years. It's a number of years past, and they're in Mississippi. The dad is still obsessed with reclaiming his land and going back to Uganda. But the family runs a liquor store in Mississippi. The daughter, they all live in like a motel, and the daughter helps clean at the motel and do other things. But then she meets Denzel Washington, and so they start to they fall in love, start a relationship, but then there's an incident that happens midway through the movie where they've kind of not been like secretive, but she hasn't really disclosed the relationship to her family and things like that, and so something kind of comes to pass, and it kind of spirals a lot of their lives out of control. But this one's I really enjoyed it. It's Denzel Washington and Sharita Chowdhury, who's the female lead, and it's like a peak, like a sexy ass movie. Like this is like two apex hot people. Like it's not like what Reed was just describing. Like it's like two like apex hot fucking people who are like doing gaga love eyes to each other the whole time, and then they have sex at one point. Yeah, and that's like, I mean, that's what should be the main takeaway for people, is it's just like super hot people just being in love for a lot of, like that's like the whole vibe of the second act of this movie. And it's also just like, it's a very like the chemistry is really nice. It's just a very like naturally, like, I mean, you got Denzel Washington, so he's fucking charming. And she's able to like kind of play along with him in a really great manner. Like they seem very like natural together. But I think I think it's a pretty smart movie. It kind of not only digs into like, it kind of digs into the dichotomies of like colorism. So it's not like, it's not like what you would expect, like a white and black or something like that film. It's kind of getting into the very nuanced intricacies of colorism and kind of how that shapes people, because you have this Indian family that has, at least the father has this negative view of black people because of how he was treated getting kicked out of Uganda. And so he kind of has this prejudice against them. And then you have the African Americans in Mississippi who kind of have this prejudice against these Indian families because it just kind of shows like and it's mentioned many times, like, why are we fighting each other on this different, like, we're kind of all in the same boat, we're all below the power structure in place wherever we are. And so it's constantly kind of dealing with that, but not in a very, I like that it deals with it in kind of through the nature of like this relationship between these two people, rather than, it's not like it's not a college lecture. And I think it's just very thoughtfully done. I think that especially like the daughter and the father-daughter relationship between Mina, the main character, and her father, I think are just are really great. I really, and then I have to kind of just give a shout out to her mother, Sharmila Tagore, who was in the second Apu movie by Satyajit Ray, and then in a number of his movies. So I was kind of like, a little fan person moment. But yeah, check out Mississippi Masala if you want to just like watch two hot ass people fall in love, and like dance, and like walk around bayous and kiss, and just be like being hot people in love. This is the movie for you. Literally, like every Letterboxd review is just these people are incredibly hot. Like what? Like here's two for you: the hottest leads in any movie ever, and then people say bisexuality is being greedy, when I'm actual fact it's just being stressed and confused about which extremely hot person you fancy more in films like this. So that's the vibes here we got going on, and like it's just, well, they're not even, they're just two hot ass people. Like they're just two hot people, and you're just like, good for them,
Well, some like it hot.
Oh, you trying to transition into the second part?
I was my thought I'd try my hand at a little podcast transition.
Yeah. Let me finish first. But Mississippi Masala, it's on like I said, Criterion Channel. They just put out an edition as well. I think that probably is the only way you're going to be able to see it. But yeah, it is. We got Criterion sale going on right now. Honestly, good blind buy if you're like looking to just kind of take a chance on something. I think this one's worth it. So, but you know what else is hot?
Some like it hot. That was not a what?
All right. Well, we're gonna talk about Some Like It Hot in part 2.
All right. Bet you can't wait.
Part 2 of episode 412 of Cinematary. In this part, we're going to be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies with 1959 Some Like It Hot. Directed by Billy Wilder, from a script by Wilder and I.A.L. Dizzy Diamond, which is a badass name. The film stars Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon, and Joey Brown. After witnessing a mafia murder, slick saxophone player Joe and his long-suffering buddy Jerry improvise a quick plan to escape from Chicago with their lives. Disguising themselves as women, they join an all-female jazz band and hop on a train bound for sunny Florida. While Joe pretends to be a millionaire to win the band's sexy singer Sugar, Jerry finds himself pursued by a real millionaire as things heat up and the mobsters close in. The plot for Some Like It Hot was taken from a 1951 German film, Fanfaren der Liebe, written by Robert Theorin and M. Logan. The story, to which writer-director Billy Wilder had purchased the rights, featured two Depression-era musicians who are driven by poverty to pretend to be gypsies, black men, and finally women in order to find work with various bands. In an article by co-writer I.A.L. Diamond, he stated that he and Wilder spent a year developing the script. Wilder and Diamond decided to drop the first two plot devices from the Theorin-Logan film and focus on the men dressing as women and joining an all-girl band. Initially, the Wilder-Diamond script was set in contemporary times because they felt they needed a situation more powerful than poverty to compel the characters to dress as women. According to Diamond, he suggested that a period setting would make it easier for the audience to accept female impersonation, and Wilder then came up with the idea to set the story during the Jazz Age and have their characters witness a gangland slaying as motivation for hiding out. The gangland slaying that figures prominently in the film was loosely based upon the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre that took place in Chicago on February 14, 1929. The hit was linked to mob boss Al Capone and took place against his longtime rival George Bugs Moran over control of Chicago's bootlegging, gambling, and prostitution rackets. Diamond stated that Wilder offered Jack Lemmon the role of Jerry. Lemmon gave him a verbal agreement to appear in the film despite being under contract to Columbia Pictures. Tony Curtis was signed first, but United Artists pressured Wilder to cast a bigger box office name than Lemmon for the second male lead. According to Diamond, at UA's recommendation, Wilder approached Frank Sinatra, but Sinatra failed to make an appointment with the director. A modern biography of Wilder states that the director also had approached Anthony Perkins to co-star with Sinatra. Danny Kaye was also considered for Lemmon's role. Mitzi Gaynor was considered for Sugar until Marilyn Monroe wrote to Wilder expressing the hope that they could work together again after their success with The 7-Year Itch. Wilder stated that he had hoped to cast Edward G. Robinson in a mobster role, but because of a long-standing disagreement between Robinson and supporting actor George Raft, Robinson refused. George Raft was in the movie. So Diamond said that Curtis came up with the idea of Shell Oil Jr. mimicking actor Cary Grant's speech pattern. Diamond's article and numerous modern interviews with Wilder described difficulties with Marilyn Monroe during filming, including 47 takes of the line, "Where's that bourbon?" that was eventually shot with the actress's back to the camera. Monroe lacked concentration and suffered from an addiction to pills. She was constantly late to set and could not memorize many of her lines, averaging 35 to 40 takes for a single line, according to Tony Curtis. The line "It's me, Sugar" took 47 takes to get correct because Monroe kept getting the word order wrong, saying either "Sugar, it's me" or "It's sugar me." Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon made bets during the filming on how many takes she would need to get it right. 3 days were scheduled for shooting the scene with Shell Jr. and Sugar at the beach, as Monroe had many complicated lines, but the scene was finished in only 20 minutes. Wilder spoke in 1959 about making another film with Monroe, quote, "I have discussed this with my doctor and my psychiatrist. They told me I'm too old and too rich to go through this again." But he also admitted, quote, my Aunt Minnie would always be punctual and never hold up production. But who would want to pay to see my Aunt Minnie? He also stated that Monroe played her part wonderfully. According to information on file in the MPAA-PCA collection at the Ampus Library, the Reverend Monsignor Thomas F. Little of the National Catholic Legion of Decency found Some Like It Hot to contain, quote, screen material elements that are judged to be seriously offensive to Christian and traditional standards of morality and decency. The subject matter of transvestism naturally leads to complications in this film that there seemed to us clear inference of homosexuality and lesbianism. The dialogue was not only double entendre but outright smut. The offense in costuming was obvious. MPAA head Jeffrey Sherlock responded in a letter dated March 18th, 1959, saying, quote, "So far there is simply no adverse reaction at all, nothing but praise for it as a hilariously funny film. I am not suggesting, of course, that there are not dangers connected with the story of this type, but girls dressed as men and occasionally men dressed as women for proper plot purposes has been standard theatrical fare as far back as You Like It and Twelfth Night. We, of course, are not defending the too exaggerated costumes worn by the leading lady." Kansas, the state of Kansas, delayed distribution for 2 months when the State Board of Review refused to approve the picture unless over 100 feet of footage, mostly of the love scene between Sugar and Shell Oil Jr., was cut. And the Memphis, Tennessee Board of Censors rejected the film, then agreed to pass it if it was restricted to adults only. Variety 1959 said, "Some Like It Hot is probably the funniest picture of recent memory. It's a wacky, clever, farcical comedy that starts off like a firecracker and keeps on throwing off lively sparks till the very end." And in 1959, the New York Times said, "Some Like It Hot does cool off considerably now and again, but Mr. Wilder and his carefree clowns keep it crackling and funny most of the time." On that note, let's talk a little bit about the film, and we're going to put Reid on the spot since... you're coming in as our expert.
Coming in hot. I don't know about expert, but I've seen it. I've seen it a number of times, and the first time I saw it, I fell in love with it, but was kind of put off by different aspects of it, especially for a movie this old. With the frankly, I left wondering if it was problematic the way it portrays certain things, but after seeing it a few times, the keys for me to this movie are the comedy and then Marilyn Monroe, and the comedy only works in my opinion because of Monroe, Curtis, and Jack Lemmon. They're all, I think, just so perfect in their roles, and I think Monroe's so good here. I think she's incredible. Even with everything you said with how hard she was to work with, how much trouble she was going through, I think this movie comes alive. The first moment it most comes alive is when they're rehearsing on the train and she's playing ukulele, and it's a pretty short scene. It's only 30 seconds. She drops the flask or whatever too, but I think that's when this movie really just the energy picks up, and from there I think it's nonstop funny. So entertaining. And then on this watch, it is a really thoughtful movie, especially in its comedy. I think a lot of the interactions, especially later, as you have Jack Lemmon's character falling in love with the millionaire yacht owner.
This is my only chance to marry a millionaire.
I know, that's such a good line. Such a good line. And then you have, Tony Curtis doing the opposite thing to Sugar. He's pretty sleazy. But it's so funny, and the way they play off each other I think is amazing. And I actually didn't know it was based on something else. I kind of want to watch the previous movie. That sounds very different. But I think what doesn't stick with me as much from this movie is all the mob stuff. I think it's a nice storyline to go with it, but really once they're in Florida and playing music, and speaking of the love scene, the extended love scene on the ship, cutting with the dance scene with Jack Lemmon's character and Osgood. Yeah, Daphne and Osgood. That is one of my favorite stretches of any movie ever, because it's kind of what you're talking about, the Mississippi Masala. It's one side, it's Tony Curtis is sleazy, but he's very attractive, and Marilyn Monroe's obviously an icon, and it's a really good scene between them two, and then it's cutting back, honestly, I think he does whip pans, fake ones. He does, yeah. To the dance hall, and they're just doing this really exaggerated cha-cha, and Osgood at one point is "Daphne, you're leading again." It's just
the best part of it is when they're switching the rows between each other. I like that one.
Yep, it's so good. And then
it's so funny how it's gradually she seems so pissed off at first to be there, oh, I can't believe I'm doing this favor, but then eventually they're both just so into it. I guess I shouldn't say she, but still as the character, it's very funny.
Yeah, and then later there's a callback to when they're the mobsters show up at for their convention or whatever, and they're scared and packing, and then Daphne takes a second with the mariachi, the maracas, and is just taking a second to go back to the dance and his mind. But it is so, I just think it's such a funny movie. It's pretty, and I think it transcends the time difference too. I think audiences can watch it now and still love it. But I'd love to hear what y'all thought too.
I loved speaking about just Jack Lemmon's performance. I like how one, he's just so neurotic, and then they finally like get on the train, and he immediately switches on to like one of the girls.
Yes,
like it's
yes.
like he's just so like, he's just talking to all of them, and he's like, "Hi, I'm Daphne. What do you? I love your nails." Like he just immediately switches over.
He does so good. It's the performance of a lifetime.
It cracks me up every time.
It's just funny, just the dynamic of the two. Like, was it Jack Lemmon's character who's Daphne? He's just so like chatty and goofy and like maybe like mildly annoying but endearing too. But then I'm sorry, what was the other actor's name? He's just so cool. Like, you know, he's like, I'm like the cool guy, but now I have to be a girl, but I'm just gonna like mostly keep, I don't know, they're fun to play off of, the two of them, and just how like they complement each other. Also, I guess this movie felt a little different watching it now, just realizing, I don't know, I guess as kind of a young adult, like living on my own, I don't know, I mean, I feel like it was the same situation last time I watched it, but I'm just kind of seeing like all the little circumstances they're getting themselves in and out of, just because they're kind of scrappy. You know, they're just kind of living paycheck to paycheck and just like from one hustle to the next, and the like decisions they have to make that kind of get them in trouble. You know, like lending from people or like just taking whatever gig they can because they're just so desperate to like pay this bill and that bill, and it's, I don't know. So I guess I never really noticed that piece of it and just kind of how endearing it is in that way. I don't know, kind of in a relatable way, but it's a series of really goofy, unfortunate events, I guess. But then they fail up, like somehow, you know, that by the end, it all works out for them. And that's probably true. You kind of get this idea that this is the cycle of their characters. Like, they're going to just be, like, constantly facing, like, calamity, and then, like, a really, like, randomly really good thing happens, and randomly another terrible, like, it's just, I don't know, going to keep escalating forever. I don't know. So I think that it's just kind of adorable in that way, this, like, buddy movie.
Reid, you mentioned that like this is something that you feel like you could drop in front of somebody today, and they would still find it entertaining, even people that younger than us. I mean, it's interesting kind of looking at the movie, because on the surface, you would kind of like you said, you would assume that it would like have people would find it problematic with how they're dressing up as women, things like that. I mean, I guess what for both of you, what about the movie kind of throws that out the window? Because I think that doesn't really hold much. I mean, I think it's there's not anything too problematic about it, because it's never making fun of the fact that they're dressed up as women. It's just making fun of them.
I think it does play a little bit with, you know, the fact that they realize some of their like shitty behaviors as men towards women, what that actually feels like in the like female experience too. So I think that, I don't know. I guess it's not really for me as a cis person to, you know, I don't know if I understand like how the movie feels. Like it would be a hostile kind of interpretation, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know.
Go ahead, Reid.
Oh, sorry. I don't know either as a cis person, but I think watching this time, I thought the conversation after the scene we were talking about, the love scene mixed with the dancing scene, the conversation they have in their room, really kind of hones in on it, as Jack Lemmon's character is frankly, like, he's now engaged to Osgood. Like, he seems genuinely confused about a lot of things. But also it seems to, like, in my mind, slip between a lot of gender things, and in the end kind of seem like gender doesn't really matter. And that's where it felt maybe a bit more progressive to me.
Yeah, it feels like just kind of a queer story. I don't know, like the way that they have to kind of play with gender and then experience it, and experience attraction and love in a way that they weren't expecting to. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think if the movie had just been, like, even at the start, if you don't know what you're getting into, and you see just, like, the way Joe interacts with, like, the woman at the beginning that works for the music label guy, he's like really rude to her and like is sleazy. And you're like, if we're just gonna watch like 2 hours of this, I'm not sure I want that. But like you're saying, Jess, like by about the middle, they're like having a lot flipped on them because they're seeing like the way men are looking at them. They're also like experiencing a lot of this world as women, and it's just I think that also is an interesting perspective for it. I mean, it never overtakes the comedy, which like I think is why it's not like blatantly like, oh, this movie is saying this about gender, because at the end of the day, I think it is a comedy first and foremost. Like, it's not trying to make grand statements.
Well, you also have to look at who, like I said, like who's the joke being pointed at. You know, it's one thing. Like never in the movie is it making fun of like the way they look or the fact that they're dressed up as women or anything like that. Again, the joke is always just on them, like on the absurdity of them and what the missing information that they are lacking. And so that kind of shows that, yeah, it's not attacking the act of, you know, it's not attacking trans people or the act of people who want to dress up as women, you know, for performance reasons or things like that. It's literally just kind of going like, no, we're just making fun of these two guys. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing.
Also, I don't know, I have this, in my head, I make jokes a lot in movies, when somebody's, like, in a really big situation, they're like, well, crap, everybody's after me, like John Wick, you know, everybody's after me, like, what am I gonna do? And I, like, anytime I'm watching movies like that, I'm like, look, the choice, like, the decision is obvious. You gotta some like it hot. Like, you need to dress up and try to, like, dress up as the other gender, nobody would ever suspect, and then you'll make, like, imagine if John Wick had done that, right? Instead of, like, have to shoot up, like, an entire city of people who were after him or something.
Entirely different movie.
I mean, he could, yeah, exactly. But he could have done it. So, I don't know. I think, honestly, it's a genius. It's a genius idea. Now I feel like that could feel, like, invalidating or insulting, and that's not what I'm meaning to imply either, but... Hey, it worked, okay? They were able to get themselves a gig, so... And they had to get away from the mob, like... Can you blame the guys?
Speaking of the mob, I found them kind of funnier on this rewatch, just because you realize like how much it's hamming up, like, not necessarily mob movies in general, but like mob movies up to that point. So that's why he was wanting somebody like Edward G. Robinson, who's known for crime movies and mob movies, to be in it, because he was more spoofing the mobsters. Like I sent Jesse a Snapchat of just like, can you imagine if you were Spats, who literally his whole personality is, I'm a mobster, I wear spats, and I drink buttermilk.
It's so funny at the beginning of the movie because it feels like you're watching something completely different. Like, you're in this police chase, like, undercover operation thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, and we, like, turn the camera, and it's actually about these two goofballs. So I liked in the first half, I like the juxtaposition of the tones between, like, the mobsters, but the goofballs that we spend time with. But I didn't love, in, like, the very last act of the movie, when the second group of mobsters show up in the hotel and they're, like, all standing around that table and they're about to do that birthday scene. I kind of thought that the mobster that they picked for the guy who was leading, yeah, and he had the headphones on. I didn't understand what they were going for at all, and I kind of liked how serious, how, like, almost, like, overly serious they took it in the first half. And so the second half, even though it does end up with, like, a shooting and a bunch of people die, it was like, I just don't even take the scene seriously because I didn't like that performance so much.
Yeah, it's probably a reference to a mob character from, like, a 20s or 30s movie, because I mean that's the whole that's the whole thing that they're making fun of in that whole section, is just, or at least with that subplot, is they're just kind of making fun of, like, I mean, you have literally the one guy who's actually Edward G. Robinson's son, who's not even, like, flipping the coin, he's just, like, throwing the coin up to himself, and it's which is just, you know, like, that's also a reference. And so it's just like, it's constantly just kind of making fun of, like, if anything, it's making fun of how absurd the mobsters are, over, like, it's not making fun of any absurdity with the men dressing up as women. It's making fun of how absurd these mobsters are and how silly they look just in terms of their tough guy personas.
Yeah, I mean, there's the toothpick guy at the beginning who, like, you know who he is because he just has a toothpick in his mouth. And, like, after he shoots him, he goes and, like, knocks the toothpick out of his mouth. It's very... you can just totally see a movie prior to this doing stuff over the top and way too serious like that. Yeah, I like you said, Jess. Like, I like how it feels like you're in one movie, and then you suddenly pan, and you're just like on these side characters from that movie for the rest of the time, and I just think that's so fun. Like, and it's so entertaining from there.
These poor babies like have no idea what they accidentally like got themselves involved in. It's so silly.
Well, it's such a funny introduction too, because I like that when they see the police badge. And well, Jack Lemmon sees it first, and Tony Curtis goes, oh, and they just start packing up, like they don't even like hesitate. They just go,
Yeah, they know. They know what they know. Like they always knew this was a risk when they like picked this gig, you know.
Something I picked up on this time, Tony Curtis is so, like, physically smooth. I had never thought of him as such, like, a physical actor, but, like, in that scene, he also, right after, like, slides down the fire escape ladder, like, really smoothly. Jack Lemmon, like, jumps off it, basically. And he also, like, cat climbs up after his date with Sugar. Like, he cat climbs up to sneak back into his hotel room. And I just thought that was, like, such a funny moment, because he just walks her up to the front door, and then he just immediately starts climbing the awning by the front door.
Well, and it's such an interesting performance in this, especially if you've seen like Sweet Smell of Success, like where he's slimy, but just like super, super slimy. And there's not like a redeeming quality to it. At least he's kind of slimy in this one, and he somewhat redeems himself to a degree. You at least kind of like him at the end. Like when he's Sidney Falco, you're just like, this guy, like he's just the worst until by the end of the movie. Yeah. It's kind of tough other than like naming sequences about like what makes this movie funny. But we talked about him a little bit, but I do think that like, you know, Jack Lemmon helps really kind of lighten a lot of this movie up at the beginning. But I did want to talk a little bit about Marilyn Monroe's performance. You know, we mentioned it's pretty well documented, all the kind of issues behind the scenes going on there with this movie. But I mean, what do you all make about her performance? Not only just as like an actor in this, but also just kind of being kind of, you know, really that third lead between you kind of have Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon who are working on this wavelength that she has to kind of, you know, get to. And I feel like a lot of the time she does. Even though she's maybe not like as comedically savvy as they are in terms of like turning that stuff around, she kind of does her own thing and it's effective.
I like that she's just, I don't know, I mean, to me she's so adorable. Like she comes off like kind of just a relatable, clumsy, like lovable, beautiful woman who just feels very messy and human, and silly and a little dumb, but like I think all of these things are just kind of very endearing and lovely about her, and I feel like when you watch her on screen, her presence is just so commanding. Like I kept noticing myself, like anytime she was on screen and talking, I couldn't look away. Just the way that she just looks just so sweet and genuine as she talks. So, I mean, it kind of, I don't know, I wonder what my perspective is had I known about the difficulties they had that she was having personally too, how that would color on a rewatch, how I interpreted all that. But I don't know, she's just mesmerizing, I think. And I can just see why, like Billy Wilder said, you know, it was I don't know if I would do it again, but at the end of the day, like she there's something wonderful about her, and even though it was difficult to deal with, it was completely worth it because she's something. She's stunning. She's wonderful. I also think it's just, I mean, even if you just want to think about her as a sex icon for a second, like how difficult that must have been for her, and kind of like how brave she kind of had to be, especially in that time. Even now, I think women in Hollywood, especially like really attractive women, have a really hard time. and I just can't imagine, you know, as she was making movies, how that must have been. But I think she's just amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I think she's like magnetic. Like you said, you're drawn to watching her, and I think it's kind of funny because with all the line reading she had to do, clearly, I don't think you'd ever pull like a clip from this and show like this is great acting, but she like overcomes all of it. Like I actually like, I think her performance in this is actually one of my favorites because I think she makes the movie, but she's doing things you kind of never see actors do because she seems so authentic, even through like the messy lines and stuff like that. She seems very real, and she's just like, she like all the musical scenes I think she's fantastic in too. And there's just something about her that you just have to watch, like above Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, who are great. Like she draws you into this movie more so even, and she's hilarious in Wilder's other movie with her, 7 Year Itch. Like she's so funny, and I do think it's like that little bit of playing dumb. Like I think she knows it and is like playing to it a lot.
It's a performance,
and it's so, she's so good at making it comedic and making it funny, and I'm sure that was hard on her as well. Like I'm sure doing like making her persona funny like that and not maybe the smartest person in the room, in terms of like when she's on screen, would be really tough on her, like in her own head. But in terms of her on-screen performances, it makes them wonderful. Like it makes it very believable and hilarious most of the time.
It kind of reminds me, it honestly kind of reminds me of Anna Faris in Smiley Face, although Anna Faris, it, like, comes off as much less, like, just mesmerizing, attractive, and just more hammy and silly. But some of the times that she would just kind of be like, wow, I don't know, kind of reminded me, just like the way that she would respond a little slowly or just very like hypnotically, and her like naivety in the performance that, you know, like, I just can't help those, was a bassist, she's like, or fiddle, the saxophone, she's like, I just can't help. I don't know, it's like so like airy almost, or breezy the way she talks, kind of reminds me of Anna Faris and Smiley Face a little bit, and I'm wondering.
Well, yeah,
that was an inspiration.
Well, it's less like, you know, to your point, that it's not like she's like going to be bringing in awards for the acting performance, but like her performance is very much like a personality. Like she's very she plays off, you know, she's like, yeah, I'm a little dumb, you know, I make dumb choices, but, you know, I'm just trying to do this thing, you know. She's very charming just because she's kind of like, yeah, like I know that, I mean, like, you know, you're not pulling one on me by telling me that, just, you know, that's just who I am, I'm just having a fun time, like, calm down.
See, I would want to be friends with her immediately. Like she's just, I love the genuineness of it. Like, I think most people are like, hello, my name is Susan. Like just, that's it. But she's just like, hey, here I am. And, like, that's the kind of person I would want to be friends with. She's just...
Well, when you have you have the introduction with her, and then initially like Jack Lemmon's just fawning over her, and that whole thing is just entertaining. Just the sequence of her coming in the bed and him kind of insinuating, like, he's like, oh, I got a surprise for you, and then the people just keep coming in with it, and he's just like, you know, like, it's just great because you have the overzealous Jack Lemmon with the overzealous Marilyn Monroe. It's just, you know, it's very fun between the two of them. But no, I think it's kind of it's a perfect complement performance because you kind of have the other two having to chew up screen time, and then she kind of comes in and can just float through a scene and kind of do what it, you know. I'm sure it was frustrating that she wasn't hitting her lines or doing that kind of stuff, but also like she kind of has this breathlessness, this kind of floating element where she's kind of floats through the scene, does whatever she wants. It seems a little off what you would have scripted for it, and there's something kind of natural and nice about that. Anything else about Some Like It Hot before we wrap it up? I mean, you know, I second what we talked about before, but I think it's a movie that if you're a modern, you know, movie watcher who's kind of like wanting to watch some classics and get a sense of, you know, since it's classic movies, I think this is a super easy one to go ahead and put on that list of like it's a classic movie
hard to
that
digest,
people,
yeah.
that people who watch classic movies love it. Yeah, that I think you'll laugh and find very entertaining the entire time. It won't be like, you're not watching Bicycle Thieves, y'all. So, but I don't know. Do you all have any final thoughts on Some Like It Hot?
No, not really. It's a hard movie to talk about, I feel like, because like you said, like we can just talk scene after scene, like in terms of comedy and lots of funny things, and there are some interesting themes, but it's not necessarily like a heady movie, but I think that's part of what makes it so great too. Like it's just so enjoyable.
Yeah, it's kind of compared to Billy Wilder's other stuff, it's difficult because you look at like Ace in the Hole and Double Indemnity and like Sunset Boulevard, there's like kind of showy performances and like the scripts there and all that. And this one, it's not like the script is bad. It's just it's just kind of bouncing around. It's just very like lighthearted and fun, and so it's not like you can really like there's not like a deep character it's not like Gloria Swanson and Sunset Boulevard. There's not like a deep character study you're gonna do on this one. It's just like no, it's just a fun time. Well, cool. Well, that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post the movies that we talked about in this episode. If you would like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Cinematary, where from $1 to $5, you're welcome to support the show. Thank you to our supporters, Cam, Chad Newsom, Corey Willingham, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Teresa Marsati, Titus Arthur, and Tyler Chandler. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, we're going to be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1958's Elevator to the Gallows, which it's exciting. It's been on the Young Critics list, I think, for a couple of years now, so finally getting around to it. But until then, thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.